Sanji has finally been confirmed as a Conqueror's Haki user, taking his rightful place alongside the other two kings of the monster trio, Luffy and Zoro. Now, whereas Luffy and Zoro were always portrayed as obvious conquerors from the beginning, Sanji's character journey has been a little more complicated. While Sanji fans will be adamant that he was an obvious conqueror from the beginning as well, and I definitely acknowledge that there were clear signs that I myself overlooked, at the same time, writing-wise, part of the point is, precisely as Gaban says, that Sanji is not an obvious Conqueror's Haki user, the way his monster trio counterparts are, because the core concept of Sanji's character, his values, and his struggles are fundamentally different. Sanji's late-game Conqueror's Haki reveal isn't just about having Conqueror's Haki, rather it goes to the very message of his character, and how he represents a fundamentally different type of king than what we've seen in the story so far. So before we get into it, make sure to subscribe. But first, it's officially summer, and that means that you're probably gonna want to look good, but you don't want to work too hard at it. Let me tell you about Factor, the sponsor of this video. Factor sends you meals that are pre-prepared by professional chefs and dietitians. That means you're getting ready-to-go food delivered straight to your door that both tastes good and is good for you. So this summer, you can just relax. Go out, spend your evenings and weekends having fun. Don't worry about cooking or meal planning or wasting money on takeout. Factor takes care of everything for you. And they've got so many choices to pick from basic things like steak to Southwest-style chicken and cheesy cauliflower. And the best part is the meals are going to keep you at a good calorie count. 97% of people say that Factor helps them live a healthier life, and 92% say it makes life less stressful. If you're curious, just try one box using my discount, and Factor will throw in free breakfast for you for a year. Just head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code MORGEFB50 to get 50% off your first Factor box plus free breakfast for a year. That's code MORGEFB50 at factor75.com to get 50% off plus free breakfast for 1 year. So that aside, to begin with, I will sincerely apologize for doubting that Sanji had the makings of a Conqueror's Haki user. There was, in fact, a clear indicator all the way back in Baratie that I underestimated, although this has nothing to do with Sanji's ambition and drive for the All Blue, which I've seen Sanji fans argue. We will get to that misconception soon, but the simplest way I can put it is that Sanji clearly does show the qualities of a king throughout the series, but he tends to do so in circumstances and contexts that diverge dramatically from other traditional conquerors. Again, this is in a way reflected in Gaban's own observations about Sanji. Sanji does not overtly present the qualities of a king, but they are buried in there. To draw a contrast to Luffy and Zoro, if we look throughout the story, it's made very clear repeatedly that other characters instinctively view them as kings long before the concept of Conqueror's Haki is ever properly introduced. Over and over throughout the story, pre-timeskip characters repeatedly become convinced that Luffy has the potential to become the Pirate King, aka the King of the Seas. And with Zoro, there have been many times throughout the story that characters view Zoro as an obvious leader, even assuming that he is the natural captain of the Straw Hats. Characters are regularly surprised at the fact that Zoro, of all people, is actually the subordinate to someone else, as characters immediately identify him as someone who would not naturally be the subordinate to anyone else. Basically, over and over, Oda all but spells out that Zoro follows the traditional mold of a conqueror rather than a traditional subordinate to a captain, and Zoro himself makes it clear that the only person in the world that he would bow down to is Luffy. In any other organization, Zoro would only join if he himself were the boss. And of course, Zoro's core motivation is to stand at the pinnacle of all swordsmen, and he would rather die than not have his place at the top of the summit, which is obviously a path that only one with the disposition of a king would walk. Now, Sanji has never been characterized like this in the story. There has never been a time that characters have talked about Sanji as though it's obvious that he would be the top dog, or that it's strange that someone like Sanji would be a follower. He is simply not characterized like this by others. Sanji is acknowledged as strong by other characters, of course, but there are countless characters in One Piece who are acknowledged as strong who are also not viewed as conquerors, because Conqueror's Haki isn't just about strength, it is the very nature of one's spirit, to have the innate disposition of a king, the nature of one who naturally stands above others and does not bow down. Unlike Luffy and Zoro, no character has ever talked about Sanji in that light, but therein it appears lies the point of the character. Sanji has that same spirit, but it's not overt, and the reason for that, aside from Sanji's own traumatic past and self-image, is that the contexts in which Sanji's conqueror spirit and fortitude show up are fundamentally different than Luffy and Zoro's, as well as to most Conqueror's Haki users in general. See, in Baratie, we were shown a fundamental difference between Sanji compared to Luffy and Zoro. Whereas Luffy and Zoro both showed extreme, transcendent conviction in the pursuit of their dreams, as observed by Zeff and Mihawk, it was clear that Sanji did not have the same sort of drive. Zoro choosing death over achieving his ambition is of course contrasted with Sanji's confusion as he asks why Zoro doesn't simply throw away his ambition. Now, a lot of Sanji fans get upset when I bring up this point and are probably typing comments as I speak, as I've seen many Sanji fans make the fallacious argument that Sanji showed the same drive as Zoro as a child. Now note, Baratie does show that Sanji has the same drive and qualities of a king similar to Luffy and Zoro, but it is not in the context of Sanji's dream of finding the All Blue, and this is a crucial point to clarify to understand the point of Sanji's character. Let me explain. What I've seen is that many Sanji fans argue that as a child, Sanji acted in the same manner that Zoro did against Mihawk, arguing that Sanji was ready to die for his dream just like Zoro was. The problem is that the two scenarios aren't really remotely the same, and the only way to believe that they are the same is if one fundamentally misunderstands the point of Zoro's scene. And what Oda is communicating is unique about Zoro's character through the Mihawk scene. When Mihawk has his knife through Zoro's heart, Zoro is essentially given a choice. He can step back and live, but that would mean stepping back from his dream. Or he can refuse to step back from his dream and die on the spot. The point is that Zoro is faced with an ultimatum. Would you rather live but forsake your dream, or choose your dream and forsake your life? This is obviously an insane ultimatum, because obviously as much as it hurts, most everyone would choose to live, because what's the point of choosing commitment to your dream if that means that you immediately die without achieving it? But that's exactly the idea behind the transcendental sense of conviction that Zoro is displaying here in his dream. For him, life is literally not worth living without his dream. Therefore, of course he would rather choose death. That is the core character concept of Zoro. His character is meant to exemplify extreme commitment to one's ambition, and that is what Oda focuses Zoro's journey around for the rest of the series. Trying to argue that Sanji is the same would require fundamentally misunderstanding Sanji's character, because the point of Sanji's character is completely different from Zoro's. Sanji is the type of character who would stifle his dream for certain reasons, whereas Zoro never would. And so when people bring up that Sanji's scene as a child proves that Sanji is the same as Zoro, it means that you missed what made Zoro's scene unique. Sanji as a child isn't ever having to choose like Zoro between his life or his dream. Even claiming that Sanji risks his life for his dream here is a bit of a stretch. What happens is Sanji's ship is attacked by pirates, and Sanji believes that they are going to kill all of them anyway. Therefore, Sanji decides to fight back because he doesn't want to die. He's fighting because he already thinks that they're going to kill him. So he's going to do the best not to let that happen. Yes, that's very brave, but it's not much different than what countless other One Piece characters would do. Sanji does go on to express that he wants to keep living because he wants to find the All Blue, which again shows that he cares about his dream, but at no point is this a situation where Sanji is having to choose between his dream or his life. Sanji is just establishing that he wants to keep his life, partly so that he can continue to pursue his dream. Essentially saying, I don't want to die because I want to find the All Blue is very, very different than Zoro saying, I would rather die than not be the world's strongest swordsman. One statement is admirable, the other statement is insanity. What makes Zoro's scene with Mihawk so powerful is that there's no reason for Zoro to do it. Why challenge Mihawk when it's certain death? Why then refuse to keep your life just to hold on to a dream that you can no longer even achieve? It's completely illogical, but Zoro's conviction transcends logic. With Sanji, it's obvious why most people would act how he did in this scenario. If you think you're going to die without getting to achieve what you want in life, then of course it's natural self-preservation to want to fight back. The equivalent scenario to what Zoro did would be if in this scene, Zeff had said to Sanji, I will let you live, but only if you abandon your dream of the All Blue. And Sanji then told Zeff to kill him. Sanji obviously never displays anything like that, which is why it's a disservice to Zoro's scene to claim that Sanji's is just as meaningful. You don't have to disregard the meaning behind one character's moment in order to prop up another's. Especially because the thing is, Sanji does in fact have multiple iconic scenes in the series where he is in fact faced with a similar ultimatum that Zoro faced. And Sanji in these scenarios does show the same conviction as Zoro to forfeit his life. And it's these moments that we will be discussing in this video. It's just that those moments are not related to Sanji's dream, because Sanji isn't defined by his dream the way Zoro is. Sanji never even mentions the all blue after Baratier outside of one throwaway joke. Trying to argue that Sanji has shown throughout the story the same type of ambition as Zoro is basically arguing that you want Sanji to be the same character as Zoro, when the entire point is that Sanji isn't like Zoro and he isn't even like Luffy. Yet he is a king just like them nonetheless, because his conviction comes from a different place. Being a king has nothing to do with your commitment to your ambition. Just as it doesn't matter if Whitebeard has a grand dream like Roger, what matters is the transcendent will that Whitebeard shows in the contexts that do matter to him. And this is where things come full circle. Sanji, all along from Baratier, showed us the qualities of a king that he had. It just wasn't in the same context as Luffy and Zoro. Because whereas Luffy and Zoro's Conqueror's Haki traits can best be seen in their drive towards their own ambitions, Sanji is willing to stifle those ambitions for something else. However, Sanji's Conqueror's Haki traits can best be seen in that which he refuses to stifle. Sanji's will of the Supreme King is most consistently seen in his otherworldly conviction in his moral code. The scene that establishes Sanji as a future Conqueror's Haki user isn't him saying that he doesn't want to die as a kid. Rather, it's Sanji being willing to die rather than back down one single inch from protecting Zeph's dream. This scene right here is the true equivalent of Zoro's scene with Mihawk. Sanji at this point in time is okay with throwing away his dream of the All Blue. What he is not okay with throwing away is the dream of his father. That is what makes Sanji different from the rest. Sanji has always had the kindest heart, and that is what was established all the way back in Baratier as well. Sanji puts others' needs above his own, and so this long-standing debt that Sanji feels to Zeph, that is what he upholds above all else, including his own life. This is Sanji's Zoro Mihawk moment. This is the ultimatum where we see his conviction. Sanji is being beaten to a pulp by Pearl, being brutally smashed by his iron fists over and over. Sanji could easily fight back and defeat Pearl, but he's not allowed to, or else they will kill Zeph. And so Sanji makes the same sort of resolution that Zoro does. Even if Sanji standing there and taking the punishment means that he will be beaten to death, it doesn't matter. Sanji would rather die than allow his father or his father's dream to be taken. What Zoro and Sanji both show in their respective Baratier scenes is an otherworldly conviction in a principle, even at the cost of one's own life. Zoro would not take a single step back from his dream because he values his dream more than his life. Sanji wouldn't take a single step back from protecting his father's dream because he values his debt to his loved one more than his own life. Having the conviction to make such irrational but noble choices and not back down is what we regularly see from those with transcendent wills. The ones who refuse to bow down are conquerors. It's just that Sanji's transcendent will tends to show up the best when it's for the sake of others, and this is what we continue to see for the rest of the story. But first, you can get 9 more of your favorite One Piece characters for your wall. We have 9 new dynamically illustrated One Piece legends with 9 hidden iconic moments. Get Proud Whitebeard with a hidden final stand. Get Noble Katakuri with a hidden sacrifice. Get Legendary Kuma with a hidden dance. And plenty more along with our legends from before. And this month only, for any 2 posters you can get 2 more free and Blackwing Emu for free, with the deal auto-applied at checkout. This deal is only running for this month, and Blackwing Emu will never be available again. So make sure you get your deal now by hitting the link in the description below. Just one arc after Baratier, we had another huge moment of resolve for Sanji, where he puts his own life on the line over Zoro's. They're both in a desperate situation against the Fishman pirates. Someone needs to risk their lives trying to save Luffy underwater in the Fishman's home turf. Sanji doesn't even like Zoro or care about him at this point in the series, but he knows that Zoro is severely injured, and therefore the right thing to do is to volunteer himself as tribute in Zoro's place. Similarly, one of Sanji's most iconic moments was, of course, Thanks for the Light, where Sanji arrives in the nick of time to kick Usopp out of the way to take all of Enel's fury upon himself. This has always been Sanji's recurring MO, the moments where he has his strongest moments of conviction, and ironically, as Gaban says, this also plays into why Sanji's Conqueror's Haki has been buried for so long. After growing up with his own sense of self-worth so trampled upon by his father and brothers, Sanji naturally isn't going to show the same level of drive towards his own goals. But he is always going to be willing to trade himself in the place of someone else, with Sanji believing that he should be the one to take the pain. But interestingly, there's a second component to all of this, which is that the other area where Sanji can always be relied upon to show extreme, unyielding conviction is in Sanji's resolve towards upholding his code of honor. If we think back through the rest of the series, the greatest moments of resolve Sanji has displayed have not been related to his ambition or drive like Luffy or Zoro. Sanji has always shown the greatest resolve when it comes to his code of honor. Sanji refusing to back down to protect Zeph wasn't just Sanji being self-sacrificial out of the kindness of his heart, it was also a tenet of his code of honor. Sanji placed the debt that he held towards Zeph above all else, and because of that debt, he refused to back down because he was absolutely certain that this was the morally right thing to do. This also played into why he traded himself for Zoro at Arlong Park. It's part of his chivalry, his code of honor. And this of course is taken up to 11 when it comes to women. As funny as it sounds, even instances like Sanji refusing to fight back against Khalifa, even if it meant potentially losing his life, is an example of him having the traits of a conqueror. Refusal to bend on one's convictions in the slightest. It's just in a context that is very atypical. And of course, finally, and most memorably, we have the ultimatum that Sanji faced during his Germa transformation. Sanji believed that he was transforming into a man who would no longer live by his own principles, a man who would strike a woman, and Sanji had such extreme conviction in his principles that he would rather die than abandon them. So again, exactly like the Zoro Mihawk scene, the very ultimatum that clearly marked Zoro as having the qualities of a king, Sanji too faced that type of ultimatum with the same conviction. And again, the only difference is Zoro would choose his dream over his life, and Sanji would choose his principles over his life. Kill me if I can't follow my dream, kill me if I can't follow my principles. This is both the defining difference and similarity between the two characters. Two different types of kings, but the same strength of conviction that makes them both conquerors in their own right. And speaking of the Zoro Mihawk scene, maybe the funniest display of Conqueror's haki traits ever depicted in the story is the Sanji Ivankov scene juxtaposed with Zoro and Mihawk scene at the end of the pre-time skip. Zoro is finally willing to humble himself to some degree in order to continue in the pursuit of his dream. But ironically, at the very same time, Sanji outright refuses to budge in the slightest on his principles to Ivankov. Ivankov is literally offering Sanji the New World Haki training that Sanji so desperately covets, that he absolutely needs in order to continue his journey with the Straw Hats. Sanji is currently abandoned on this island with no other lifelines, no other ways to get stronger, and all Sanji has to do is wear some women's clothing. And even still, Sanji refuses point blank to bend even a millimeter on his principles, no matter what Ivankov is offering him. And as crazy as this sounds, this is how someone with Conqueror's haki acts. So at the end of the day, Sanji serves as a reminder that the qualities of a conqueror can show up in many different lights. It's not about wanting to stand at the top of the world. What matters is that there is a part of you that refuses to yield or bow down in some way, no matter what. Be that for the sake of freedom, for the sake of your ambition, your family, your friends, your refusal to run, or simply your own personal moral code. So let me know in the comments below which remaining characters you believe will have Conqueror's haki in the future, and if you enjoyed this video then definitely like and subscribe. And if you want to hear an interesting pattern that Oda has consistently written Sanji with throughout the series in contrast to Luffy and Zoro, you can listen to my weekly podcast that just came out by becoming a member or by supporting me on Patreon, link in the description below.